Let me more formally introduce members of our community today. Because today is July 4th, it is the 75th commemoration of the pogrom that took place in Kielce, July 4th, 1946. It is still the case that many of us feel a special obligation to identify with this day. And the film that was made by the co-directors Michal Jaskulski and Larry Loewinger represents an attempt to tell not only the story of what happened on that day, but the story of the leadership of Bogdan Bialek and a number of people from Kielce and around to begin an educational process that is described in the film. Our hope is that everyone has already seen the film and that we'll be able to move shortly into a discussion of the film. Among the people who are going to greet us today are people who have a special connection to the story of Kielce. Among them is the first speaker, who is Yaakov Kotlitzki, who is going to bring us greetings. Mr. Kotlitzki is a businessman in Israel, and I'll let you tell Yaakov more about your biography. And please note, everyone, the synagogue that is behind Mr. Kotlitzki as he brings us greetings.
Okay, thank you, Haim. Yes, I put the synagogue in the background because this was still is the symbol for everyone, every Jew that lived or his family comes from Kielce. If you tell someone that you have been in Kielce, visited Kielce, especially the first generation, so the first question was, have you seen the synagogue? Have you seen the ceiling? And what is the ceiling? It's not the synagogue. The synagogue is not existing. It was looted, it burned down, destroyed later, and rebuilt as another building, the archive, and the ceiling is gone. And unfortunately, we don't have even a picture, a photograph, or anything. It was a very splendid object of art, and this is lost forever. I still hope that one day someone will come with some picture of that ceiling. Anyhow, my relation to Kielce is from my parents. My parents and also the whole families come from Kielce, or the status around Kielce, from Chenchin and Pushno and some others. Both of my parents, Tzvi and Sarah Kotlitzki, have been born in Kielce. My mother is from the Kolchak family in Kielce. They married before the war in 1938. And when the war broke, my parents and one of the uncles of my mother's brother escaped to Russia. Immediately after the war started, escaped to Russia and spent the first 2 years spent there in Chelyabinsk, in the Ural, in Siberia, working in a camp of coal mines, very hard work. And then we released and moved to Tajikistan, to Leninabad. In 1946, when it was possible to return to Poland. In the meantime, my brother Moshe was born in 1945. In June 46, they returned to Poland, but it was impossible to go back to Kielce, so they were sent to what was called the new territories or the liberated territories in Shlonsk, and they got some place to live in a small apartment in Gliwice. I was born in 1948 in Gliwice. Few days after they returned to Poland, my father and my uncle, Abi Goldscheid, have decided to go to Kielce and to see whether they could find any survivors. Probably there was some property to take care of, see what would happen to it. And mainly, as I heard, was the mission to go to the court and to get some documents, because in Poland, all documents were, personal documents were registered in court. So this was the mission, and apparently it was July 4. I don't know if they arrived the day earlier or the same day, arrived to Kielce. On July 4, understood at a certain moment what's going. They were aimed to the court at that time to get the documents, but the mob started to chase them and they escaped. The court is next to the house of the police. They are all at the same place. So they were running to the police to get shelter, and they passed through the entrance of the court, and the guy, the person that was the keeper of the entrance of the court, he recognized my uncle. He recognized him because my great-grandfather, Marek, the Lewe, it was Goldscheid, the Lewe means the Melamed. He was a rabbi, but he was also an officer in the Russian army. He worked as an interpreter, and he was very known in the Kielce court as an interpreter and writer of petitions for Poles and Jews, and he was interpreting from Polish to Russian to Yiddish and Hebrew. All the four languages he could translate. So he was known there. So he called him and he said to him not to go to the police. And he opened the gate and let them into the court. It was a Pole, as you can imagine, into the courthouse. And there they found shelter in the basement. For 3 days they were there until it was possible to get out. My father and uncle, of course, they were released. They went to the police. They took part in the funeral. Michal is discovered in the film. My father always told me that he took part in the burying of the victims, and Michal succeeded to find out him carrying a coffin into the grave of the victims. So this was a very nice surprise for me. In a nutshell, I would say that this is the story of the family. In 1948, I was born in Gliwice. In 1950, it was possible to immigrate to Israel. We immigrated to Israel, and since then, I'm in Israel. I would say for many years, had nothing to do with Poland. Of course, as a businessman, I had a company and also an office in Warsaw, and used to come to Warsaw from time to time. And I had a chance also to visit Poland in 1996 with my mother, and to go through all places where the family lived. And since then, I am the encyclopedia for the family history and the knowledge of where everything happened for all the family all over the world. Anyhow, in the year 2000, my mother passed away. My father passed away earlier, and I decided to do something. I found a bunch of letters that were sent from Kielce ghetto to my parents in Chelyabinsk, and for my family in the ghetto. Well, it was the start of the ghetto, not still yet the ghetto there. And showing it to Bogdan. He decided that this is important enough to translate it, to publish a book about it. and he published a book with the letters from the ghetto, and that's all history. But anyhow, in 2000, I started a project with Dr. Marek Machingovsky to publish a book about a shtetl named Lopushno, which is about 30 kilometers from Kielce. It's part of the family, originated from there. And the book was published in 2004. And since then, I was visiting more often Kielce, and at a certain moment, Noa and Bogdan. And since then, I am partner to what is called the Bogdan's journey. I was his partner to that journey, taking part in many of the activities, many of the projects. I am a member of the Israeli Kielce Society. There are a few tens of members here, all of the second generation. So I am also responsible for the foreign affairs. I am like the foreign minister of the society, and also found myself involved with everything in Kielce, because I'm also the only one that still speaks some Polish. So so this is my, I think, background of my family and myself. And now I am retired, of course. I'm very sorry that today I couldn't be in Kielce and take part in the commemoration, but would like to congratulate Bogdan and Andrzej for organizing a very moving commemoration ceremonies, and hope that next year I will be able to be there, enjoy them as usual in the past. Thank you.
Yaakov, thank you. Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to invite one more person before we hear from Bogdan. The person is actually my boss, Dr. Noa Marco, who is the medical director for the very impressive series of Jewish services to the elderly. The Jewish Home, it's called, in Los Angeles. He's the child of a survivor of Kielce, and he's going to say some brief greetings, and then we'll turn to Bogdan and the co-directors.
We do not hear.
You need to unmic. Down at the left, there's a microphone. You have to. Okay. Do you see the microphone, Noah? Okay.
The microphone in the Zoom is open, so it is something with the microphone in the computer or in the phone.
Yeah. Noah, I'm sorry, it's not working. Let me just say that Noah has been very interested in issues relating, and he is holding up a picture that I asked him to hold up, which appears in the movie, and he's connected to Kielce through a number of the people that appear in the picture. And when Bogdan was here in Los Angeles, along with Larry Loewinger and Michal.
Does it work now?
Yes, it does.
All right. All right, so Rabbi, you don't have to speak for me. So again, I apologize for the technology challenges. So that's now I'll go obviously even briefer than my brief comments were going to be. So as Rabbi Beliak said, I'm Dr. Noa Marco. I live in Los Angeles. And my father, who in America was named Bernard Marco, but when he was born in Kielce, He was Beni et Mortgage, and Dov ben Mordechai Leib Chana is his Hebrew name. And he was born on 3/3/11, and this is his baby picture that was sent to a relative in America, and that is why we have it. And then he left. He was married before the war started. His entire family, brothers, sisters, parents, and wife, and this is a picture of them pre-war. They had lived in Kielce for a couple of generations, and they were all killed in Treblinka. He survived. And on July 4th, 1946, he was in a DP camp in Germany and was with other Kielce survivors. And they said, do you want to go back to Kielce? And he declined that offer and met my mother, got married, and they came to America, where my sister and I were born. A few years ago, as Rabbi Beliak was saying, I happened to go to a screening of the movie Bogdan's Journey. And as we showed just a moment ago, this picture is used in that documentary. And the gentleman that is pretty prominent in the back row, tall, dark hair, is the brother of my father's first wife. And he moved to Israel, and we visited him many times until his passing. And there are many other people in that picture that I grew up with in the survivor community. My father was, without a question, a member of the Kielce Society. And so my father's story is one that I share often, as my mother was also a Holocaust survivor. And one of the things that anyone who sees Bogdan's Journey, they know that there are many stories in that film, and it's my hope and wish that all of those people who see and watch that film take those stories and share them with the world. And I want to thank the filmmakers and Bogdan for continuing to keep this story in the news and pertinent, because it's clearly still pertinent to today. So thank you for letting me share a little bit of my father's story.
Thank you, Noah. At this time, I'd like to reintroduce Bogdan Bialek and invite him to perhaps share with us some of the recent events that have happened. Would like to maybe hear how things went today. It's late in the evening in Poland, and perhaps he can share some of his current work as well. At some point, I'd like to ask Bogdan to be sure to tell us about the work of the Jan Karski Society, which continues to be active in Kielce. So thank you for being with us today, Bogdan.
If I may just interject for a second, because I want to be sure that technical instructions about interpretation into English are clear for all the participants. So we've invited you to use the icon that you should be seeing somewhere on your screen, depending what device you use, which says interpretations. If you want to hear the, let's say, the English track of everything that gets said, please go into that, and then there you will see two channels, Polish or English. Please press English to make sure that you hear English as a cover for what Bogdan is saying in Polish, and others might as well. That's all. Thank you. Handing over to you, Bogdan, now.
Haim, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. Although indeed I am very tired, today's commemorations lasted for over 4 hours. And as you can imagine, All my activities related to today's commemorations took even longer. Just like every year for the past 22 years, we started by meeting at the cemetery near the grave of the victims of the pogrom. Now the grave looks completely different than 25 years ago when the first large public commemoration ceremonies took place. Back then, it was first of all a nameless grave, and it didn't describe the reason of why it was there. And that grave has changed thanks to a great engagement of Yaakov Kotlitzki, whom I'd like to thank very, very much for his constant, unchanging presence in all of our actions. And I'd like to thank him for the great support that he's giving us, not only financial support, which of course is priceless since we are always struggling with that, but also for his intellectual and spiritual support. I'd also like to thank Rabbi Haim Beliak for his enormous engagement, especially when it comes to promoting the film Bogdan's Journey. What Haim is doing is simply priceless, as well as all his support for what we're doing in Kielce. This year's celebrations and commemorations were unique because they took place during yet another Polish-Israeli-American crisis or Polish-Jewish crisis related to the new reprivatization law. This law makes it more difficult for descendants of Polish Jews to make their claims regarding their lost property. This is all very unfortunate, and it causes a great deal of tensions in Polish-Jewish relations. And this is destroying the very subtle efforts and actions of many people in Poland, both from the Christian and the Jewish side. Well, the Jewish side in Poland is also a Polish side, so I'm saying the efforts of both the Christian and Jewish representatives to build these bridges of reconciliation. This year, we had a special representative of the United States for Holocaust matters. So I was expecting some political tensions to arise. And I must say that for many years I have tried to keep this all the commemorations and the memory about the pogrom, to take it out of the current context. That's why I never invite politicians. If they want to, they do come, but usually they don't want to, or even not usually, they simply don't want to. We don't meet them there. So as I said, this year we started by meeting near the grave of the victims. We said prayers there. There were basically no speeches. We had the chief rabbi of Poland, but also a very wide Christian spectrum, including Archbishop Markowski from the Roman Catholic Church, who is the head of the Committee for Polish-Jewish Dialogue, but there were also representatives of different Christian churches. And we also had representatives of both branches of Islam that we have in Poland. And then we had the ceremonies by the menorah. And I'd just like to emphasize that in my introductory remarks, I made a remark to emphasize that before the war, 1/3 of the residents of Kielce were Jewish. So 1 in 3 residents of Kielce was a Jew. So what does it mean? It's not about statistics, but it's about the great contribution of Jews to build Kielce. So their great effort, both in the material substance of the town, but also in its development, since the first cultural institutions in Kielce were built by Jews. The first theater, the first cinema, the municipal hospital that was helping not only Jews, but all the residents. The first bus route was a joint Polish-Jewish initiative. The first newspaper, the first municipal newspaper was also a Polish-Jewish initiative. So here I told about our regrets, but I also said thank you. I think we don't say this often enough. And an event that was very important for me that took place during the first march, when we were walking at the head of the march. I was there along with some other men, Polish and Jews. We all had kippot on our heads, and suddenly we approached the street. There was a car who just stopped there with noise, and there was a young man who yelled to us, "Don't be afraid, you have the right to be here. This is your home." And I wanted that when we are talking about this painful history of the Jews from Kielce, to be accompanied also by this message. So I said that to many of my friends, also from Kielce, who participated in this year's commemoration, and I told them, don't be afraid, you have a right to be here, this is your home. Thank you.
Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you for your sharing with us the events of today. I've posted a link to a very important conversation that took place earlier this year between Jan Gross and Bogdan about what has happened since the publication of his books, Fear, Neighbors, Golden Harvest. There was a very heartfelt conversation for which you have the link from the Jan Karski Society. And I'd like for Bogdan just to share a little bit of what that conversation is about as a way of inviting people to view the video, which has subtitles in English. It's part of the ongoing effort of the Jan Karski Society, which Bogdan founded with his brother, Andrzej, to continue not only the presence of a museum, but also the teaching activities of the Jan Karski Society in Kielce. Could you share a little bit about that conversation with Jan Gross?
Yes, of course. But before I do that, I'd like to mention one very important element of today's commemorations. So for the first time, we publicly mentioned among the victims of the second pogrom from 1946, the names of the victims of the first pogrom from 1918. Not many people know about that, but the first pogrom in the free independent Poland took part on November 11, 2018, exactly in Kielce. On the day when Poland regained its independence, in Kielce there were the first anti-Jewish actions. And as a result, 4 Jews were murdered, over 200 were severely wounded, and many Jews lost their properties, stores were looted and destroyed, and homes and workplaces were also destroyed. So I think that today we are not able to understand the second pogrom without the first one, since they were only 28 years apart. That's not a lot. we 31 years have passed after the collapse of communism, so we can see that that's not a long time. And probably a lot of those who participated in the pogrom from 48 also participated in the one on 1918. And that first pogrom was caused by some deeply rooted anti-Jewish biases and just plain wicked hatred. I must say that on the eve of that pogrom, in the newspaper Ojczyzna, Homeland, published by the Curia of the Roman Catholic Church, on the first page there was an article entitled "Should Poland be for Jews?", which very kindly, referring to Jews, wished them that they can finally go to their homeland, that is, to Palestine, since Poland wasn't their homeland. I'm saying this ironically, of course, with a painful irony. And now going back to the question that Haim asked, that was a very interesting conversation. It was an interesting conversation because it happened after the discussion that I had in Warsaw that took place between Jan Gross and Adam Michnik. And I must say that Adam Michnik, a friend of Gross, they've been friends for a long time, so the chief editor of the largest democratic daily in Poland that used to be very influential in Poland, Gazeta Wyborcza. I used to work there, by the way. So he was very cautious about what Gross was saying. When it comes to his book Neighbors, where Gross described the murder conducted on the residents of Jedwabne, on the local Jews, so the local Christian population closed all the Jews in a barn and they set it on fire. And Michnik simply didn't believe. He said this must be an exaggeration or hysteria. And he was afraid that that book would stir some very strong anti-Jewish feelings. But he changed his attitude towards the book and towards all of that. And I must say that when in 1990 I was being attacked in Kielce, then Adam believed that I am exaggerating and he didn't want to inform the public opinion. And Adam Michnik changed his attitude to Gross's book one day when a resident of Jedwabne came to the editorial office and he told Michnik that he would like to explain the truth about the events in Jedwabne. So Michnik very gladly invited him. He was interested in his information and he asked him, well, okay, tell me what actually happened. And he said, well, Mr. Michnik, Gross is lying. He said that Poles burned in the barn in Jedwabne 1,500 Jews. Mr. Michnik, that's not the truth. They couldn't have burned more than 700. And Adam Michnik was really shocked when he heard that, and then finally he believed Jan Gross. That conversation in Warsaw was very difficult, and actually there was no joint conclusion at the end. Since Adam still believed that, yes, we have to talk about this, write about this, but he said that Gross is lacking empathy towards Poles, of course. And that's why I invited Janek Gross, and we must say that another one of his books, Fear, which talks about the Kielce pogrom, was firstly published in Kielce. And then Gross, in many interviews, emphasized how valuable that conversation was. So that conversation in Kielce was kind of unique because Jan Gross was talking about his path that led him to be interested in the topic of the martyrdom and the suffering of Jews inflicted by Poles. And he talked about how he matured to kind of systematically and scientifically researched this topic. And he talked about his great difficulty. For example, he said that he knew about Jedwabne for a long time, but for him that story was so shocking that he felt this great emotional barriers. Something was stopping him, and he needed a lot of time to find the courage to face that evil face to face. And that's how he explained the reaction of Adam Michnik as well. So that's the value of that conversation. That Gross is kind of showing his path, but also the path that many people have, many wise and good people in Poland who simply needed some time. Let's remember that Gross was educated in Poland. That's where he was educated. Only the anti-Semitic events in 1968 forced him to emigrate from Poland, but he was leaving Poland as a fully developed person. And he said that the style of education in Poland, in the spirit of patriotism, and there's where we define Poland and Polishness as something that is unblemished, perfect, that being a Pole means to be a victim, and that this mentality was so deeply instilled that it didn't open us to the evil that the Poles were inflicted themselves, both to themselves but also to the weaker ones that were the minorities, such as Jews, but not only Jews, for example, Ukrainians, Belarusians. So that's why this conversation is so valuable.
I thank you, Bogdan, for that. And there are many other parts of the interview that I found very interesting, including the discussion about, can we speak of Polish Jews, or do we speak of Jews and Poles? That was a very informative part of the conversation as well. I want to turn to our co-directors now, because they are really to be celebrated in their persistence and in their attempt over so many years to tell this story. It's a complex story. And I'm going to ask Michal to begin. You can speak in Polish or in English, whichever you're more comfortable with. And thank you, Michal. The question that I want to ask you is, reflecting now 6 years after the conclusion of the film, what are your thoughts as you see how things have developed? Dare I ask you the question, has there been some progress? And how do you respond to what I discovered when I saw the movie, and that is that often people missed the great event of the movie, which was this powerful reconciliation that Bogdan and the people of Kielce had built with Jewish people from Kielce, and how they focused so much on the events of the history and missed these important steps that had been taking place. I'd like to get your reaction.
Well, I don't have a feeling that, I don't feel these 5 or 6 years since the premiere of the film. I have a feeling that as we started with Larry in 2006, the story continues and continues and continues, not only because when we finished the film, we had this numerous screenings across the world, and it was a great experience to see that you're making a film that people around the world more or less react to the same way. With all the horror that you can see in the film, you can also see this ray of light. You can see some hope, and that was happening wherever we showed the film. 6 years after, or 5 years actually, we premiered the film in 2016. It's the film is not that that alive as it was right away after the premiere, but it's finally accessible worldwide, which, you know, right now the link that you, Haim, have connected to our meeting today is that this is a link where people worldwide can watch the film, and the film is coming back right now. Just a week ago, we got a call that there is a rabbi and an institution in Chicago that wants to show the film, and they will show the film on July 17th in Chicago. There are for me, the story is not over, because there may be another project this time. It's going to be a feature film that will tell the story of, partially tell the story of the pogrom, or actually will tell the story of people who are a part of the pogrom. So for me, the story is not over. It's a subject that somehow, you know, by accident, maybe by accident of meeting Larry, and then of meeting Bogdan, has somehow become a part of my own life, and it somehow stays with me. You know, as for example, it's very painful to me that, you know, I was looking today at posts of Jan Karski Society on Facebook, and seeing the commemoration, which actually I wanted to be a part of, and it ended up that I couldn't be there. But at least if I'm not there in person, then I know that my work will keep me to the subject.
Thank you. Thank you, Michal. And Larry is speaking to us from the wilds of New York. If you could share some of your thoughts, please, Larry.
Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, good. First thing, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to see you all. And I want to reinforce what Bogdan said at the beginning when he started to talk about both Michal and I are, you know, we're very grateful for the support you gave us, Haim, and Yaakov at an earlier stage had given us. And we deeply appreciate that. The film would not have been made without Yaakov's support. And it wouldn't have had whatever success it's having without your support. So, Haim, so thank you very much. I'm interested in, you know, in bringing this up into the present day, because the world has changed, you know, a great deal since we finished the film. I remember at the very end of the filming process, and which was around Christmas time, 2015, I think we're talking about 2015, walking down one of the main streets of Warsaw for a screening at the Polish Film Institute, an obligatory screening that they wanted to have, which went very well. But before we went in, I believe we passed the presidential palace at that point, and Michal pointed it out to me. And the president of Poland was a representative, I don't remember the party, but basically a moderate liberal, a leftish party ruling Poland then. This was the very end of Barack Obama's regime in the United States. Shortly thereafter, we know what happened. And the world that we're living in, and there is unfortunately, much less difference between what happens politically here in the United States and what's happening in Poland. So the film has a different impact, I would think. It is 5 years old, and it's not as actively, well, it is and it isn't, but it's not as actively being distributed as it once was. You know, we're not doing any festival circuits or anything like that. But the film still has a relevance, particularly now in the kind of world we're living in now. And so I'm really interested in hearing actually more from Michal and more about and from Bogdan as well. Bogdan, you talked about, you described the ceremonies today at the cemetery, at the memorial. I'm curious to know, and you said there were no speeches, but there were representatives of various religions in Poland. What was the secular response to the 75th anniversary year of the pogrom from the Polish government, the national government, any of that from the city, which was actually helpful to us and supportive in different ways when we were making the film. I'm curious to know what kind of response they had. I was also intrigued by you mentioned of a representative from the United States who was assigned Holocaust issues. Why did he come to Kielce, and what is he about? What is he doing within the United States government? And Yaakov, I have a question for you. Is there any impact in Israel? I imagine it would be fairly small, but maybe not, to this 75th anniversary moment. So those are my questions for all of you.
Yes, of course. So I only mentioned the commemorations at the cemetery. The Jewish cemetery in Kielce is at the outskirts of the city, so we needed some time to move to the center. And then there was an over 2-hour-long march from the menorah, from the place where the old synagogue used to be at, the one that Yaakov mentioned. There is a memorial of the righteous among the nations there, and from there we walked to the tenement house by the planted streets. This took over 2 hours. The mayor of Kielce participated in the march, but as he emphasized, he's participating not as the mayor, but as an ordinary citizen of the city who is moved by the events from 75 years ago. As he said, he felt that it's his duty as a citizen, not as a politician, to be in this place at this time. When it comes to national authorities, several hours earlier, the Deputy Minister of Culture laid a wreath there, and then he left. Then he appeared at the cemetery for a moment, but he didn't speak. As I said, we don't have any speeches at the cemetery, but then during our commemorations within our society, he didn't participate in those. So when it comes to the interest of the local and municipal authorities in our activities, I must say that last year we were in a dramatic financial situation since our subsidy was reduced by half. It's actually a very modest subsidy from the town. So at that moment, there was actually a threat that we'd have to close down. And also the pandemics and all its consequences didn't help. So I was actually facing the threat of closing down the organization. If I hadn't received help before, I would have been forced to do that. But before I talked to a representative of the municipal authorities, and I told him that because our budget has been cut in half, I will be forced to close down. And I heard from the deputy, and he told me, well, no one is forcing you. If you want to close it down, then go ahead. And then that gentleman had the audacity to ask me if I am a Jew. And in Poland, such questions are illegal and they are unacceptable.
No, ale ja tego nie zostawiłem, tak? I poprosiłem, między innymi też prosiłem Haima.
But I didn't want to leave it at that, so I asked Haim and Yaakov to write me support letters, and I filed that letters to the mayor of Kielce, and as a result, the deputy was removed from office. So now I hope that our coexistence and cooperation will not have such conflicts anymore. The political situation in Poland is really terrible now. I didn't want to talk about this, but since I've been asked by Larry, let me say that the situation is really terrible. We've had 3 or 4 very serious anti-Semitic acts over a short period of time. For example, in Bielsko-Biała, the Jewish cemetery was being profanated, and there were some very terrible writings, such as that the Jews prepared the situation, the Holocaust for Jews, or for example, Polish neo-fascists, nationalists, threw some rubble in front of the Israel embassy in Warsaw, and they wrote a dedication, "That's all you're entitled to." So this is referring to the discussions, the American, Israeli, and Polish discussions about the reprivatization laws. So the atmosphere is really terrible, and this is also being played out politically. But I must say that at the cemetery I approached that deputy minister because the Jewish cemetery is in a horrible state, and I'm thinking that I actually should already retire, but it looks that I will still have to engage in saving the cemetery. I will not go into details here, but I approached that deputy minister, and he promised me that we'd receive a national subsidy for our efforts. So we'll see, maybe that will happen. And let me also use this occasion to, and I forgot about this because I'm treating Larry and Michal as my family, but I would like to publicly really thank them for preparing the movie, which really did a lot of good. Quite often I was kind of embarrassed because I am taking up so much space in that film. But that film really did a great job when it comes to Polish-Jewish reconciliation, and also when it comes to the reception and spreading the knowledge, since that was a really great effort, the way they presented the events from 1946, that finally they let the victims who survived speak. So thank you very much again.
Okay, I was also asked a question by Larry, so I want to elaborate on that. Interestingly, this year, of course, the whole day I was busy watching the commemoration on Jan Karski Facebook page, so I was not so free to look around, but my friend from the class, from the high school, posted me all the time what's happening in the media. And interesting, there have been quite a lot of interviews and articles about the pogrom today. I would say starting with Ofer Aderet. Of course, he is a very known journalist. He came with this story about it, and then a journalist, very known on the TV, Oren Dahari, came on the WhatsApp post to his he has about, I don't know how many tens of thousands of following, came also with a post about the pogrom. On the radio at about noontime, 2:30, at what is called the International Hour, there was a discussion about the pogrom. And on the TV in the afternoon, another discussion. But what is common to all of them, it's very interesting. It didn't happen in the past. I mean, it was very unexpected. All of them are related with the new law. The new law in Polish that is dealing with the property, with the division of property. It's very attacked in Israel by all authorities and people. And there's a big fight, political fight here between Israel and Poland. And so all these interviews, all these postcards were starting with the law and the situation in Poland, with some journalists describing what's going in Poland, and then referring to the pogrom. So the pogrom was used like another reason to show anti-Semitism in Poland, that it's not new, that it's all connected with the whole story. So, but this is on one end, this is what happened today. But on some other occasion in the past, when we launched the movie, it was very difficult to convince seminar tech in Israel to show the film. It took a few years, and they have, after a representative was appointed here for the film, we succeeded to convince them, and there have been few screenings here in Israel in Cinematheques. In Yad Vashem there was a screening also. Bogdan was participating in that screening, and there was a panel with him. In the Israeli police, very interesting, the son of Raphael Blumenfeld, which was one of the leaders of the kibbutz, actually, of the younger, the kibbutz. He was wounded very hard at the pogrom. His son Haim Blumenfeld is a very high rank in the Israeli police. At that time, he was the head of the education department of the police. They decided to purchase a copy of the film of their own, so they can screen it. And the police is part of the education of the Israeli police. This was followed by a visit of about 200 of the highest officers of the Israeli police in Poland, in Kielce, and visiting the institute, which was a very moving. It was headed by the chief of the police, of the Israeli police. So this is an effect of the film. It's one of the effects of the film. Also, Haim Blumenfeld, Bogdan mentioned before the name Haim. The Haim is the Haim Blumenfeld. By the way, today is the chief of the police of the Tel Aviv district, which is which is probably the second biggest district in Israel, the police. So he also wrote a letter with ad letters of the Israeli police to the mayor of Kielce, to the president of Kielce, about the support that the city should provide to the institute, to the Jan Karski Institute. I think that there are more. I cannot remember everything, but I think yes, I think the influence brought to the point where the society of the guides to Poland, there is in Israel, there is a very big society of guides to Poland. There are a few hundreds of guides that are working to Poland. The chief of the president, of the chairman of the society, came to the point where he understood that Kielce is a story that is important to tell to the groups that visited Poland. Until now, very rarely they pass through Kielce, and they decided that this must change. It is also an effect of the film. It must change, and we are now organizing a seminar of a special seminar starting on August 1st. Of Israeli guides to Poland, a special group of Israeli guides to Poland, Unfortunately, started with about 70 that registered and paid, but they had to cancel because of some, part of them have canceled because lot has changed the flights in some way that couldn't work well for them. I still hope that it will happen, and we'll have a few tens of these guys will come for a full day educational, visiting, etc. at the Institute with Bogdan and Andrzej. And the idea is to bring, to put, as they say, to put Kielce on the map of the Israeli groups, and to also to spend a night or 2 nights in Kielce, the center, for visiting other places around. So, and this will also bring probably some, I would say, benefit to the city itself. So we probably are going to see a big change in visits to Kielce, at least from Israeli groups. The chairman of the society, Gil Farhan, is presently in Kielce now. He participated in the commemoration today, and tomorrow he's supposed, according to what I know, supposed to sit with Bogdan and make the program, work out the program, the details, the schedules, etc., etc. So I think something is happening, and without the film, I don't think that you could convey the messages, what's going, what's happening. There's no chance to do it. So that's in a nutshell what I think about the film.
We're going to take an extra 10 minutes or so just to conclude. I want to thank Bogdan again and Michal for responding to Larry's questions. We have 2 questions. One from Manny Becker, who is going to bring us a very brief greetings from the Kielce Society in New York. Manny, if you would unmic and please join us. Okay. I don't.
You may need to move Manny from attendees to panelists in that case, right?
So I think somehow he's not on the panel list. There's one other person who I want to ask if he can speak. Sid Mahdinger, who was born in Kielce 99 years ago and is a very prominent attorney involved with civil rights and issues of civil rights here in Los Angeles. Sid, I'm hoping that you can at least bring us greetings. Okay. So there must be some way to get them on the panel list. My co-host, Marek, has been very quiet. He was going to field some of the other questions. Maybe we can get Manny and Sid added to the panel. Okay. Dominique is reporting that Sid somehow hung up. I just spoke to him a moment ago. Okay. Marek, would you like to? There were several questions in the chat.
Why isn't this working?
Marek,
okay, I am back. I am back to the floor, but I need to make sure that Marzena is able to then take over in translation. Haim, I need to just take a second about the questions that you're referring to.
So let me look for the first question. It's from Professor David Kadar from Arizona State University, asking, did the city restore the funding for the Jan Karski Society's work with education? Bogdan, maybe you could answer that.
Yes, of course, I can answer that. Well, it's quite complicated. So still, this year the financing has been reduced, and we've received it very late, in the middle of the year, just several weeks ago, and we had to somehow manage for half of the year. But they recompensated that by lowering the rent that we have to pay for the building at the Planty Street, where we have 2 exhibitions about the first and second pogrom, where our educational activities are taking place. And they continued even despite the pandemics. We were organizing events on Zoom and on different platforms. But there is a chance that we will survive. But I doubt that for the next 3 or 4 years we will get to this minimum level that we had in the previous years.
So let me take that as an opportunity to remind people that the support of the Jan Karski Society in Kielce is something that would be very much in order so that this work can continue. We have with us Manny Becker, who is the head of the Kielce Society in New York, and we're going to ask him to bring us brief greetings. And he's been very involved with the making of the film, with supporting the film, and with other activities that we'll mention.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi. First of all, I'd like to thank Bogdan, his brother, and also the Jan Karski Society for organizing such a moving and meaningful commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Kielce pogrom. I'd like to also acknowledge that I feel Bogdan is a powerful voice for us, providing the opportunity for the people of Kielce to realize just how the Jewish community was such an integral part of life in Kielce, and how they have contributed to Kielce in so many ways. And Bogdan is reaching out to a new generation of Poles and, in essence, paving the way for understanding and reconciliation. Also, by the way, I just want to let Bogdan know I'm wearing the shirt which he gave me when I first visited Kielce a number of years ago. So I'm wearing it today anyway. But I just want to acknowledge and thank him very much, and wish him continued success. And if I have a moment also, I want to say I have also a very strong connection with Kielce. And in a way, I've gone on my own journey. And I have to thank Michal for reflecting my personal journey in the film, Bogdan's Journey. For one, and my journey, like Bogdan's, continues. And the Jewish community that once thrived in Kielce has become such an integral part of my life. I've learned about my family from the diary of Moshe Maya Baum. I've also found family that survived that I never even knew about. And I also found that I'm related by marriage to my good friend Yaakov. And that was also expressed in the film. And I discovered the family that rescued my father, and I was able to complete the task that was left undone by having the family, because the time was not really ready at that time, but I was able to pursue the Righteous Among Nations recognition for this Polish family. So I'm grateful for that. And the Polish family was mentioned today as part of the ceremony. So thank you very much, Bogdan.
I'm going to ask Mark if there are other questions that came in on chat, or if he has a question to the panel.
Yes, there is one more question which also lends itself to a response by Bogdan Bialek, who has been in Kielce today. The question comes from Jonah Buchstein, and it states, are there any opposition or left-leaning politicians speaking out today about Kielce? In other words, have you had an opportunity to hear those voices in Poland, in Kielce, or have any reports of that coming to you in the course of the day. Bogdan, could you take that question? The question boils down to a question whether anyone else beyond the central government and politicians in power have been speaking about the Kielce pogrom today. Anyone on the left side of the political arena or central opposition party, has that been mentioned in the political discourse today? Has any report of that reach you, Bogdan?
So, as I already mentioned before, I didn't notice anyone besides the presence of Mr. Selin, who just happens to be there, and that's how it's been for many years, and regarding all political options. No politician has spoken about this. For all the years that our institute has existed, we've not been visited by any politicians, with the exception of one, whom I actually challenged to do it on Facebook, since we had a discussion and I just challenged him to visit us and to see the exhibition for himself. And he showed up only once and he never returned, and he's still an active politician. And what's funny is that across the street from our institute, the seat of the largest Polish opposition party, Platforma Obywatelska, or Civic Platform, is located, and none of the politicians have simply crossed the street to just take a look at the exhibition. I'm not saying about talking to us, asking us questions, asking how to support our society. We simply don't exist for politicians. And let me just tell you a story. There was just one exception. There was one politician who has visited us out of his free will, and it was President Andrzej Duda from the Law and Justice Party. And he comes from the party which seems to be responsible for the increase of anti-Semitic tendencies in Poland. And it was unexpected. Simply one day I had American students at the institute visiting, and suddenly we had Secret Service agents who went there. They, checked everything for security, and the president appeared. He was supposed to be there just for a minute, but he stayed for 40 minutes. He wanted to see the exhibition, and he wrote something in our guest book. And let me tell you what Henio Wujec said, the late Henio Wujec, who was a renowned opposition activist and who worked at the cancellery of President Komorowski, the previous Polish president. And I asked him, well, Henio, why your party is not recognizing that one of the greatest social problems in Poland is anti-Semitism? Since if we don't start responding to this, I don't want to say fight with this, I don't like military terminology, but if we don't start to react to this, this society will never be a democratic society, since anti-Semitism is based on prejudices, and this is the basis for many different prejudices and biases, and this is poisoning our life, and it's destroying democracy, since this is accompanied with the attitude towards all the others, everyone else who is defined as the other. For example, towards political opponents. The greater the anti-Semitism in a country is, then, and actually anti-Semitism correlates with an authoritarian personality, as many research shows. People who are anti-Semites are really willing to give power to those who are imposing an anti-democratic atmosphere. And Henio told me a story when the book Neighbors of Jan Gross appeared, who talked about the atrocities in Jedwabne. He was at the cancellery of the former Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, and Tusk said, well, I guess we have to visit Jedwabne. The anniversary is approaching. And So that was proposed to Tusk, and Tusk said, yes, of course, organize the visit. And then a cooperator of the Prime Minister went there with polls, and he said, I have the recent polls of the public opinion. They were asked about the cause of the atrocities in Wabne. 80% of respondents are denying that Poles were to blame for it. And then Donald Tusk said to Henio, okay, then let's not go there. So that's my answer.
Thank you. That's a very powerful answer. We are coming to the conclusion of our time together. I want to thank all the panel participants, Manny Becker, Yaakov Kotlitzki, the co-directors of the film, Michal Jaskulski, Larry Loewinger. I'd also like to thank Bogdan very much after a very long day to be with us. I want to especially thank our co-hosts, Marek, Jezowski, and Dominika Zakarszewska. Each of them have been very much involved with us formulating the ideas and the plans for not only this program, but we will be coming back to the question of this movie on several occasions in the coming year. We are expecting that this year, a very important book by one of the noted scholars of the issue of Kielce and how it was understood in Poland and so forth, will appear in English. The scholar is Joanna Tokarska-Bakir, and the book in English will be entitled Cursed, a Social Portrait of the Kielce Pogrom. With the emergence of that book, we will again be seeing that as an opportunity to encourage people to see the film, to acquaint themselves with the important issues that are discussed here. And we hope that people will continue to be a part of these seminars entitled Freighted Legacies. For those people unfamiliar with the term freighted, it is an indication that there are complexities. There's both good and evil. There's complexities of history. There's complexities of psychology. And these programs will continue at approximately every 2 weeks throughout the summer. The next program will mark a very important milestone in our work of Beit Polska and Friends of Jewish Renewal. It will mark the moment of the publication of a very important memoir by Louise Steinman, The Crooked Mirror, a memoir of Polish-Jewish reconciliation. That book has just been published in Polish by Karta, one of the prominent publishers. And we look forward to having Louise Steinman and a very distinguished panel of people. That panel, by the way, will be probably more in Polish, so we'll be listening to more English translation. But it will be an opportunity for people, I hope, to get the book in Polish or in English, The Crooked Mirror. Again, many thanks, and we appreciate this opportunity to remember these events and to remember the hope for a growing understanding between Polish Jews and Polish Christians. Many thanks to the panel and to everyone.
Thank you, Haim. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
If I might
great
just
to see all of you together.
Add one more thing. There was one question, a pretty obvious question that is left unanswered. One of the attendees asked whether the recorded material from this session be made available. and I want to ensure everyone that the recording will be distributed or made available to all the participants and their friends, of course. So watch for the information about that if you wish to have that material made available to yourself or others. And thank you very much. I've also posted the date of the next Freighted Legacy seminar, the 25th of July. Haim, if I'm not mistaken, please correct that.
Is that correct?
Okay.
And
all right.
There you will discover at the website information about the book Crooked Mirror, and also several very interesting reviews from the people of Radomsko, where an important part of the Crooked Mirror takes place. We obviously want to grow the number of people who are participating. So please tell your friends, and we want to see this seminar continue to grow.
Thanks again for being with us here and commemorating, be it very humbly, but commemorating the terrible injustice that took place so many years ago, but still scars of it remain. Thank you.
Thank you, and shalom to all our friends.
Thank you, Yaakov.
Dziękuję bardzo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bogdan. Dziękuję.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you, Michal. Thank you, Haim. Thank you, everyone. Yaakov, who's participated in this. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you, and dziękuję.